Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm the City Witch. So today's video is on the subject of magical tools, but in particular the Athame. So before I get into this, I just want to have a quick chat to you about magical tools and my opinion of them and whether I think you need them or not. So I always get asked the question by a lot of my younger students, do I absolutely have to have magical items? And the easy answer is no. However, do I think you should have them? Yes, absolutely. So the reason for that statement is because, well, several reasons, first of all. The main obvious reason is that when we go through everyday life, we are surrounded by lots of the people, lots of mundane issues and dramas, and we have our own lives to be getting on with as well, and that will involve lots of different social situations, and everything we do is considered pretty mundane. By having magical items and picking up those magical tools, you're setting aside your mundane life and choosing to put on your magical persona in order to focus and discipline yourself on your craft. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, obviously by doing that and picking up your magical tool, your mindset automatically changes and you become more focused and more disciplined and ready for what you're doing. The other thing is that you feel extra powerful and magical when you pick up a tool. You just feel better somehow. I don't know how to describe it. It's just a thing that everyone feels better when they pick up a magical item. And straight away when you're practicing spells as well, there's certain items that you know you're going to want, and obviously some tools, even though you might not think you'll ever use them, that you will. Trust me on that. So yeah, quite important. Now, do you need them? No, not at all. A lot of the tools that are recommended in books these days that you really don't need, and actually you probably will never use them. The main ones that I do think that you will definitely use and probably will want in your collection is an Athame and or a wand. Some witches don't have both, they just have one or the other. I have both and I do use both for different things, but it's personal preference. Another item that I definitely think you will want and need on a regular basis will be a cauldron. Another one will be your altar or pentacle disc. And the other one that I think that you'll need and use on a regular basis is definitely going to be candles. Now, any book won't list candles as a magical tool. In fact, they'll tell you that it's a secondary smaller tool or a supply. They won't actually tell you it's a tool, but I actually think it should be a tool and it should be way up there on the list if you ask me, because it's something all witches use, need, want and have in their craft space. So I definitely think it should be a high tool to have. Other tools they'll tell you need is the chalice and the broom. Now, if I'm completely honest with you guys, you're probably very rarely ever going to use them. I have both and I don't use them very much at all. My broom is more for show these days than actual use, and when I do use it, it's just for a massive cleansing on my home when I'm doing my spring cleaning, and after that I just stick to using smudge sticks or Polisantos. So again, not something I use regular. I do use it when I'm conducting ceremonies and rituals, but again, that's rarer these days than it used to be when I was part of a coven. These days I use it to teach my students about the craft and about the broom, and I use it when I'm conducting hand fastenings as well. So the chalice is another item that I don't think you'll use very often. So the chalice is used in ritualistic ceremonial magic, and if it's not something you're going to practice, you're probably very rarely ever going to use the chalice. There's not really much point in having one. However, it's a nice tool to have, especially if you're practicing in a large group, and it's also nice to have on the altar to perform cakes and wine ceremonies, which is something you do at the end of a big ritual practice. It's a way to honour yourself and take in some of the god and goddess into yourself. So very similar to how Christians do the cakes and wine ceremony for taking in the body and the blood of Christ. So it's very similar for us in that respect. So if you're going to do something like that, then it is a tool that you will use. But if you're not, then it's probably not worth getting. And if you do choose to do anything like that down the line and don't own a chalice, you can just use a normal glass tumbler or you can use a mug. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular, if I'm honest, guys. So you can probably bump those two off your list. I will, however, say that my main tools I use all the time is my wand, Athame, cauldron and an altar disc or plate. I use those all the time in my craft. I've usually always got them near my altar, and in actual fact my wand is probably the most used tool I have in my collection. I use that over everything else wherever I can. I use it when I want to imbue magical items, charge items, direct and manipulate energy. I use it in healing. I use it in meditation. I use it when I'm charging sigils. I use it on my altar quite a lot. I use it to cast circles and take down circles. I use it to summon in gods and goddesses, work with lots of different beings and entities. So it is one of my favourite tools to use, but all of that can also be done with an Athame. So that's why I say they're kind of interchangeable. You can have one or the other. You don't necessarily need both. I just like to use both for different things. So let's have a little look at the Athame itself. Now I have 3 in my collection that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to start with the first one that I had commissioned. But before that, I just want to mention that if you're in the bloom closet or you're quite young as a witch and you're obviously researching the craft, you're probably going to be told that your Athame is a live ritualistic blade, aka knife, and obviously your parents probably aren't going to want you to own a knife. Now there are ways around this for you, and one of the ways my parents came up with for me when I was quite young is they bought me a letter opener. Now this was actually quite clever. So this letter opener was made out of stainless steel with a silver overlay to it. It looked like a Celtic sword, and on the hilt of the sword it had inlaid in it lots of amethyst crystals. So it was very spiritual looking, very beautiful to look at. Wasn't sharp at all, it was smooth all down the edges, and the end was round, so it didn't go to a sharp point. So it was a lovely compromise. It was a nice piece, and I had it for a very, very long time. Now I would show it you in this video, but actually I passed it on to another young student I was teaching, and eventually when she got a bit older she passed it on to someone else who wanted to learn, who wasn't allowed an Athame. So it's actually become this nice item that's gone down through generations actually, so I can't actually show it you because I don't have it, but I will show you my first commissioned piece, and it was this one. So I've had this one since I was about 14 years old, and my dad had to buy it for me because obviously I was 14, and the law in the UK is that you can't own or buy a knife until you're 18 or older. So obviously I needed a parent to buy it, but I also wanted it to be to my specifications and very traditional. So we actually found a blacksmith in Chester prepared to make this for me. He worked in I think he owned the shop actually as well. Yeah, he worked and owned in a shop called Armadillo. Now I would give you details guys, but the shop shut down many, many years ago, so actually it doesn't exist anymore, and I have no contact details for him whatsoever. Otherwise I would give those to you in order to buy something like this and get one commissioned for yourself. But when I had this commissioned, he was a very nice man. He was very patient. He also was spiritual. He was pagan, so he understood my needs and he understood what I wanted out of a tool. So it was very nice having a conversation with him, and he was very good about it as well. Knowing my dad was buying it and everything, he still was willing to talk to me. So he was a very nice guy. So I'm very grateful that he made this for me. So he made me this nice case for it. And at the time I was with a group that was very pagan based, so that's why we have these pagan symbols on here. So we've got the pentagram, which obviously is protection, and then obviously the 5 elements. Then we've got the triple goddess, and then the horned god. So those were energies I was working with quite a lot at that age and at that time in my life, so I wanted them incorporated on my Athame in order to protect it. Another thing he did was he made it out of this really nice smooth leather, so this was very good for protecting me, holding my Athame, and obviously, you know, not easy for the Athame to come out or break or damage, so it's completely safe and secure in there, which is what I wanted. He also made it with this loop so I could thread that through my belt and wear it on my hip. So in the group that I was in, I had this on me all times, but my hands were free and I could get the Athame out when I wanted. Another thing I did as well was I didn't always take my Athame with me. Sometimes I took my wand and I would just take the Athame out and slot the wand in there instead. So again, a very versatile case, very useful. So let's have a look at the Athame. So the Athame looks like this. So traditionally an Athame would be 6 to 8 inches long as a blade. It would be double-sided, so as in both sides would be sharp and pointy, and then it would come to this firm point at the end. Now, they would also normally have a black handle, and then it's up to you on the embellishments, but I went with a pentacle on the end, and then he designed me this lovely piece there. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but it actually has ruins on it. It has the full Elder Hawk ruin set, and that was something I was very into back then as well. So he commissioned this quite perfectly to my specifications. So he made this out of stainless steel, but I've got to say, because it's quite old and I haven't really took care of it, because as a child you don't. This has become quite tarnished and damaged over the years, but it's still got character to it. I still love working with it, and I still work with this on a very regular basis. I love it too much to get rid of it, but I think eventually I'll probably purchase a new Athame somewhere down the line. So the wood of the handle was made out of willow, which is what I wanted. Now, he did argue with me on that because he was explaining that willow isn't a great wood to work with, but he actually did do what I wanted, and then he stained it black. Now, as you can see over the years, it has become quite, you can see there it's all coming off, but when I first bought this, that was plain black, really dark wood, because he'd stained it for me, but not so much now. It's become light damaged, and obviously over time when I've washed it and cleaned it, the paint has kind of rubbed off a little bit, which is a shame. But I'd say I have had this since I was quite young, and I'm 34 now, so you know, it's had its use. So let's talk about traditional Athame. So as I say, normally 6 to 8 inches long, both sides sharp, ending in a point, and usually a black handle. So that's the main points you want to remember about an Athame. The other thing to remember about an Athame is they don't have to be made out of stainless steel. So down the line, stainless steel has become the popular, because obviously it's stainless steel, it's long lasting, means you don't have to replace it. But I have known witches to have their blades made out of all sorts of different things. So some of the other considerations for this is that it could be iron, could be stone or crystal, could be wood, or it could be clay. And another one was a serpentine blade as well, which I think is like a wavy shape, but I've never owned one like that. I think I do know another witch that has one like that, but I don't. I do know a lot of witches that really, really like wooden ones, because the Athame, the point with the Athame is that you don't use this for any practical use. So you don't use this for any carving, cutting, slicing and dicing. It's not ever used for any of that, guys. This is only ever supposed to be used for directing magical energy only. And in rare occasions I've ever used it for anything else. Now, there's a few times when I've been doing rituals and, you know, burning things in my cauldron that actually I haven't really anticipated how high the flame's going to go. So I've actually used this to, you know, block down the flame and the item that's burning into the cauldron so that it doesn't overflow and catch fire on my altar. So that's mistakes of my youth, but actually I really shouldn't have used this for that. It's just that this was to hand. Obviously I can't burn myself because I've got a nice handle here, and you know, that really can't catch fire, so that's why I kind of did that, but I shouldn't have done, is the point I'm trying to make. This should only ever be used for ritual practices, for directing energy and casting spells. It should never be used for anything practical. So what I did was very, very wrong, traditionally speaking. However, obviously tools are adaptable. I know a lot of witches that choose to use their Athames these days to carve candles because they would rather imbue the energy of the candle and the sigil with the energy from themselves that travels through the Athame, through the point, and obviously is carved. But it's personal choice, to be honest, guys. I don't think that should be done with an Athame. I think it should be done with a bowline if you're going to do it at all. But it is your choice. If you choose to do that method, then every witch does things differently, so don't let anybody tell you it's wrong, because really nothing's wrong in the craft. It's completely up to you. So yeah, so that's what they should look like. That's what they should do. However, again, versatile tools and adapting to your needs. So adapt the tool as you see fit. So let's have a look at a couple of the other options that I have. So one of the other knives that I had, again, I think this was commissioned by my parents, and it was this one. So this again was very traditional looking. Comes with another very nice case. Actually, I think it was cheaper than my other one. I've got to say this one was about 80 to 100 pounds to have made, but I think my parents paid about 40 quid for this one. Actually, they bought me the matching opposite, which has a white there, which was supposed to be a bowline, but I never used it for that, and I ended up gifting it away. So I only have this one now. So yeah, this was about £40. And again, this one's actually heavier than my last one, despite the, you know, the look. You'd think this one would be heavier because it's very chunky looking, but actually that one was made quite smoothly. The blade was a lot thinner on that one, so therefore it weighs less. This one's quite heavy, especially here. That is really heavy, and the handle is much nicer, it's smoother, it's made like this beautiful black wood, but it's got less embellishments on it. But it is actually a traditional length blade, still has all the same uses and traditional settings as the first one, just less detail. And as you can see, I have used this a lot and it's become tarnished yet again because I used this one the same way I used the other one, and I shouldn't have done. So yeah, so there's two traditional ones for you, and I use them differently. So this one I use primarily for spells, rituals, ceremonial work, anything that's positive. This I use for anything negative, and by negative, please don't think I mean curses, because I don't go around cursing people. That's not something I believe in. I believe there's always another way to deal with somebody, whether that's binding or banishment, but that is classified as baneful magic. So therefore, this is what I use in all of those types of rituals. I don't tend to use that one for anything like that, because I like to keep the energies completely separate. So this one's what I use when I'm severing cords, removing curses from clients, dealing with baneful energies, really bad spells or other negative energies in any shape or form, and this is what I use. And then I cleanse this on a regular basis because obviously it is used for that type of energy. So that's how I separate them off. And then I have one more Athame I want to show you, and this one is not traditional at all. So this one, before I show it to you, was bought for me by my granddad. It was something I spotted on Etsy, and it was rather quite expensive for what it is. I'm sure we paid, well, he paid about £40 or £50 for it, and then we paid another like £20 shipping it as well because it came from another country. So it's quite expensive to get here for what it is. Now, in the photos on the woman's page, I was really quite attracted to her style. She was using these martial arts weapons to make some beautiful items that were really unusual looking, and she was embellishing them in some really unusual ways. So I decided to take a risk on her and get one. As I wanted it, my granddad offered to get it me as a birthday present, so I said yes. So we had commissioned this Athame, which was going to be dedicated to my goddess. All the embellishments are for my goddess. And when it arrived, I've got to say, considering how much we paid, how long we waited for it, I was very disappointed. It's very tiny, it's not sharp at all, it doesn't have any of the traditional factors to it, which wasn't a main thing for me because I knew that slightly, but because of the size of it, I thought it was going to be much bigger than what it was for what we paid, so I was a little bit disappointed. I feel like all she's done is take a pre-made martial arts item, add a few embellishments and then charge a fortune for it, which is a bit crap, to be honest. So I felt a little bit diddled, but I didn't want to say anything to my granddad or complain because it was a gift, so I kept it. I did dedicate it to my goddess. I do use it only for when I work with her, but I think somewhere down the line I am gonna try and get something more traditional, something a bit better dedicated to her, and something that I feel a bit better about, because like I said, it's not traditional at all. So this is what it looks like. It comes in this holder, and as you can see, that is quite small. If I show you in comparison, can you see the difference? I mean, there's a big difference there, guys. So this is really tiny. Came in this case, which, as you can see, still has a loop, so I'm able to have it on my belt, and it's quite hard and protective, so that's a good point, but they're kind of the only good points, I think. And then it kind of looks like this, the blade. So as I say, I liked that the blade was unusual, but if I show you, I mean, it's really tiny, guys. So I wasn't impressed for the money, but I did like all of these beautiful embellishments. I don't know if you can see them there, but you know, I got to choose some of them, and you get to customize it a little bit. And then she obviously did this nice casing here on the handle. I mean, it does fit nicely in my hand. I do get good results with it. I did dedicate it to my goddess, and I've never had a problem using it, but it's not traditional, and that kind of makes me uncomfortable because I do like things to be as traditional as possible. That's the way I like my craft, but again, personal preference, so please don't feel you guys have to do that, because you don't. So as I say, yeah, was disappointed. Probably sometime down the line I'm going to change this for something a bit more traditional, but for now I want to get my use out of it because my granddad spent a decent amount of money on it. So yeah, so this one is used just when I'm working with my goddess, when I'm and doesn't really matter whether I'm doing something positive or negative or ritualistic. I just use this when I'm working with my goddess. So if I'm going to summon her for anything, this is the tool I go for. If I'm going to do anything else, it would be this, and if I'm going to do anything protective or baneful, it would be this. So I have tools for different purposes, but normally your Athame would just be used for all of those things, and you just cleanse in between uses. So don't feel you have to go out and get all these items. It's just that pretty much all of mine were gifts, and obviously I didn't want to not use them, and some of them are very beautiful items, so that's how I separated mine off for different things. Some witches do have tools that are for very, very specific purposes and they don't use them for anything else. I do have items up in my craft room like that. I have a beautiful skull that I like to use when I'm breaking hexes, I'm doing banishments and bindings, and it's only used for that. I don't use it for anything else at all, and that's what I keep for that, and it's specially charged with all those energies as well. So that's a special tool. I obviously have certain pendulums that I like to use with clients, but I have personal ones that I keep separate. So again, your tools can be quite versatile, guys. So let's have a little chat about the Athame. So the Athame can be used for a lot of different things, and some of the ways that I've used it over the years, I'm going to try and explain to you here. So the most obvious way to use your Athame is to direct and manipulate energy. So there's two ways to do that. So I'll just show you using this one because it's small, it'd be easier to demonstrate on the screen. But obviously your point is where you direct energy, and your hand is the power point. So obviously all of your energy comes from your solar plexus, is driven out up your arm and down and into your hand. And then the minute you grip your Athame or your wand, you're then channeling that out. So this becomes an extension of yourself. But this tool becomes very, very helpful for directing that energy. Now, as I say, powerful witches do tend to use their fingers, and they will just use their fingers like that to direct or to point like that, and they will direct the energy as so. However, this is easier to focus on than your hand, and that has been proven. So having a tool, as I said at the beginning of the video, becomes quite important at this point, because this helps you become more disciplined, more practiced, and then later on you could always choose not to have this and just use your fingers. So when you're using this, as I say, energy is pulled through your body, up to your hand and out through this, and then you would direct this as you want, as so, drawing your circle. Another way you'd use this is to summon in your elemental aspects, so whether that be elemental guardians, the 4 elements themselves of earth, air, fire and water. You can use this to summon or invoke the gods and goddesses. And you can also use this to power, enchant, bless and command items. So this is all about energy, primarily. You can also use this to stir magical mixtures to add magical energy in, and often I do that when I'm chanting. Another way that you can use this, now this is very, very rare, and I only ever would say to do this if you feel safe, comfortable, and also that this is extremely clean, because if it's not, please don't do this. But I have known witches to prick their finger and use blood in rituals, but you really only need a drop if you're going to do that, and doing it with this isn't really recommended. I actually usually have a lassiter, and if you don't know what a lassiter is, it's a small little device that a lot of people use if they're diabetic, and it has a pinging mechanism on it that spikes your finger and produces a singular drop of blood. And diabetics use it when they want to test their blood to see their sugar levels. They are obviously sterile. You can get them in packs of 10 or 20 for about £3 on eBay. They're obviously safer to use, much more sanitary, and once done you can chuck them in the bin. Also means that this doesn't become linked to your blood in any way. Also means there's no DNA on it, and it also means that this, you know that what you're doing is sterile and safe, and you're not going to get any infections. So that's why I'm a bit worried to tell you that one, but actually I do know witches that like to use their Athame ritualistically to prick their finger and use blood in rituals. So it is an option, but a caution, please be careful if you're going to do that, guys. I don't recommend it. Please use a lassiter if you can, and just be safe about it. But if you are going to do it, make sure it's a clean item, you haven't used it for anything else. I mean, if just an example with this one, I mean, can you see how filthy that is? There's no way I'd use that to cut myself, because that would be quite dangerous and irresponsible. So that's just you know, another way you can potentially use it, and has been used in the past, but I don't recommend it, is what I'm saying. But I want to give you all your options. So another way that you can use this, and this is one of my favourite ways, and you can do this with a wand as well, is I draw a lot of sigils, and actually I work a lot with sigils. And the way I work with sigils is I design all my own, and I will either carve them into candles, place them on petitions as extra power sources, or draw them in chalk on my altar discs, which are usually made out of slate. So that's many of the ways that you can do sigils. However, When you make a sigil, it's imbued with a certain energy, yes, but it's not live and active and doing what you want it to do until you enchant it to do so. So one of the ways that you can do that is to empower it with your energy and activate it using your Athame or your wand. And the easy way to do that is on a sigil, you'll have this bubble, which is the starting point, and then you have a line, which is the end. So wherever the line is the end of your sigil, and the bubble is the beginning. So you'd start with the bubble and then you trace your sigil out, pushing energy through the Athame or the wand and into the sigil. And then when you finish, you just say the word activate, or do your job, or as I will it, so shall it be. Anything along those lines is fine, guys. And what you're doing there is you're giving it live energy, feeding it and activating it. And often if you watch fantasy movies and witchcraft, or, you know, magical based, they often trace things to open things or say magical words to get something going. So it stands to reason that that's the same when it comes to sigil work. So that's something I like to do. So that's something you can do as well. As I say, I have known witches in the past to use their Athame to actually carve the sigils into their candles, which is an option, but it's not really what the Athame is supposed to be used for. But if you feel that calling for your craft, then go ahead. I don't really think there's any strict rules with how you should use your Athame. Beyond going out and slicing and dicing trees and plants, that's not something I would really do with an Athame. It's something I would use a bowline for. But if you want to use it to enchant your candles in that way, or your sigils, then go ahead, guys, and just be a bit creative. So that's a couple of ways I have used mine. Another way in rituals and ceremonies is you can stir magical potions and ingredients, and again there are chants that you can say which imbue it with energy, and obviously then you can drink it or do whatever you need to. You can actually mix herbal blends as well. Sometimes I do that in my mortar and pestle. After I've grinded them all together, I'll enchant them with a spell by mixing them with my Athame, adding energy to that and actually casting a spell upon the herbs themselves, rather than use the herbs as an ingredient to a spell. They are the spell. So there's a couple of different methods for you. And again, it's all about getting creative with your craft, guys. So think about the ways that you might like to use your Athame if you're choosing to have one, because everything is versatile and useful in different ways. So another item, as I've mentioned a little bit earlier in the video, that you possibly will get mentioned to have is a bowline. So the bowline is the opposite to your Athame, and it would normally have a white handle, and it would be sickle shaped or crescent moon shaped. And that was usually used to harvest all of your ingredients from the wild to bring back to having your craft. Now, there's a couple of points here for me. Firstly, please don't go out with a huge white-handled knife and hack and slash at a plant and scare some poor old lady walking her poodle. And that's not what anybody wants to hear about. The other thing is, they're so hard to get these days, bowlines, and they're not actually very useful anymore. I actually had one many years ago, and I very rarely ever used it. And when I did, I was terrified to take it outside because it was this 8-inch blade, so it was quite big. I couldn't hide it in my pocket, and every time I got it out, somebody would go to walk past me and I'd be like, hi, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm just going to take a cutting of this hair. You know, you're justifying yourself because you're having a knife, and obviously it's illegal to take weapons like that out in public unless you've got a really good reason. Such as a license to carry, or you're a martial artist or something with a license or whatever. Really, you can't take those items out, and you could be arrested for it, and worse, fined for it. So it's not something I really recommend. So what I do instead, my Athame is a pen knife, so it's about this big. I can put it in my pocket, I can have a good look around me, and when I need to harvest something, I can whip it out, slice off what I need, thank the plant, put the knife away quite quickly. So at that point, if anyone walks past, I'm literally just holding a cutting of a plant, and I might look a bit weird because I might be leaving milk or an offering, but that's all they're seeing at that point. They're not seeing a knife. And even if they did catch the knife, again, it's a little bit easier to swallow that I've used a little penknife to cut a cut in than a huge sickle to hack at something. So there's a few differences there, guys. So I don't actually believe in having a bowline in the traditional sense anymore. I do prefer my penknife. It's much smaller, much easier to carry, much more inconspicuous and easy to conceal. Not that I'm advising you to have a concealed weapon. Please no one out there sue me for that, because that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying, if you like to gather wild herbs, use herbs in your craft, and you want to go out harvesting, then be sensible, be careful, think about the laws in your country, because everywhere's different, and think about what's going to work for you. Do you want to carry a big rucksack with a huge sickle in it, or do you want a little pocket knife that you can take a quick cut in and go home, inconspicuously, where you're not terrifying anyone or causing any problems. So that's something to consider as well, guys, possibly having a bowline. But again, something I don't think you'll need. Most herbs these days you can get in supermarkets. A lot of people grow them in their own gardens, and many witches don't actually go out and gather wild plants anymore because we don't necessarily have to. Most of, 90% of the plants and the items you're going to use are going to be in your kitchen or in the supermarket, so you probably don't need that tool anymore, if I'm honest. But just to finish this video off, do I personally think that you guys should have an Athame or any tools? I always advise my students to get them. They are beautiful things to have in your collection. They do make you feel more magical. They do help you focus and become more disciplined. And for me, I couldn't do witchcraft without my tools, if I'm honest. Magically speaking, I am the power, but over time, tools become imbued with that power because you're filling them with your energy over and over. And I actually have tools now which almost have their own personality. And when I'm using them, I can feel that come through as well. And I know what to use the tool for because it will resonate with me. That's another thing I want to mention to you guys as well. Don't go out and start buying some fantastical tools just because a book tells you to. Now, you want to think about your type of craft, the path that you want to walk, and whether you're going to likely use and need these tools. So that's the first thing you need to consider. If you've come to the point where, yes, you've decided you want to have some tools, you don't have to go out and spend a massive amount of money. New age shops these days can be quite expensive. eBay and Amazon I found have been much cheaper, but then you can't feel the energy of the tool, so that's a little bit of a negative. You do obviously have the option to return it, but that can be quite long-winded. You've got to wait for your money to come back before you can get another one, yada, yada, yada. So it kind of goes on like that. So in my personal opinion, it's better to, if you're going to buy tools, to select them yourself, to actually feel them in your hands, or to have them hand commissioned to your specifications so the energy is the way you want it to be, which is what I did with one of mine, and then the others were gifted to me, but I did fall in love with them when I saw them, so it was all good in the end. But I do think it's better to feel and be attracted and drawn to your own tools, because obviously it's something you're going to use for a very long time. If you're ever given or gifted something you don't want, there's probably someone else in the magical community that might love that tool, so pass it on. Don't feel the need to harbour things that you don't want. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to go out your way to buy really expensive tools, guys. So just as some examples for things that you can have instead of the tools I've mentioned. So instead of an Athame, you could choose a kitchen knife. Or you could choose to fashion a wooden one, which you can make yourself. There are videos online that show you how to do that. If you buy a wooden one, they're usually £5 to £10, so not expensive at all, and a little bit safer to use. These days you can get all sorts of different things instead of your Athame, which again are safe. One of the things my parents did was got me a letter opener, which was smooth at the end. So for parents out there watching this, considering tools for their children that want to get into the craft, letter opener was a good one for me. Really loved it. It was beautifully designed, it wasn't expensive, and of course because it was stainless steel, it lasted me a long time, and I was able to pass that on to the next generation of witch afterwards, so that was a good one. Instead of a wand, you can obviously use a stick, you can use a pencil because it's got lead in it, which is conductive. So again, that's another example of something you can use. I know a lot of witches out there that have decorated wooden spoons in different paints and colours, and they've embellished it with crystals and things, and they use that as their wand, and I've actually designed two like that myself. So that's also a good project, really fun to do, and obviously very personal because you're choosing what you want on it. And again, not expensive because you can buy a whole pack of 4 or 5 wooden spoons for £1 these days. So you could get one of those really easily. You could do it as a project with loads of friends as well, so lovely to do. Instead of a pentacle disc, and going out and spending a lot of money, a couple of other things I've used over the years, which were pretty cheap, was at one point in my life I used a breadboard which was just round, and I actually drew on it very carefully in marker pen a pentagram and all the symbols I wanted. So that's another thing you can do. Again, something you can get for £1 these days, and you can get them round already, so that's great. Another thing I did was I had a plain piece of slate that I got from a beach one day that was quite nice and flat, and I used that, and you could chalk symbols on it when you're doing your spells or sigils, which was great. I still have that now. Placemats, you can get placemats made out of slate these days, and made out of wood, so you can use that instead and draw symbols on it yourself. Another idea, which is something I incorporate quite a lot these days, is old antique dishes. So you can get these from charity shops for, you know, £5 or £6. I think my most expensive dish to date was 22 quid, which actually is still a lot cheaper than the actual pentacle discs I've got. So, you know, and again, they are fireproof. They are beautiful to look at because they have all these intricate designs on them. They are safe to burn candles on, and even better, when they burn down, you can then do a wax reading because it's controlled where the wax has gone. So, you know, it hasn't overflowed and ruined an altar cloth or something. So that's something I really like to do as well. Instead of a cauldron, you could choose to buy yourself a fireproof dish that you'd put in the oven. Again, something you can buy in stainless steel that's non-grease, non-stick, and you can get them from pound shops these days, you know, for £1 or a couple of quid if they're a special one. So not expensive. And again, you can burn things in it. It's completely safe. It's not going to catch fire or anything. So that's also a good choice instead of a cauldron. And as I said before, you don't have to have a chalice or a broom, but if you want to, you could use a normal brush for a broom instead. It'll do exactly the same thing if you enchant it and embellish it. And then you can, instead of a fancy chalice, you could just have a mug or a cup. It's up to you guys. It doesn't have to be a massive, massive venture to go out and buy all these tools. Get what feels right to you, feel the tools and their energy, go with what calls to you, and don't necessarily buy the first item you see either. Go out of your way to do some research, you know, look on websites, go to new age shops, go to antique fairs, or even car boot sales. I've found loads of beautiful tools at car boot sales that I love to use. One of them was a bell from Cat's Protection. It cost me 50p, made out of glass, and it has this beautiful ring to it. I like to use that in ceremonies. So just have a look around, guys. That's all I'm saying to you. Don't buy one item just because it's, you know, traditional. You know, find what works for you. But I love all my tools. I do recommend having tools and using them. I do think they are important. You know, after all these years of, you know, 27 plus years in the craft, I still use all my tools. I still make tools for other people and for my students, and I still teach them how to use all their tools, and I still recommend them to everybody because they're fun to use, they get you in the mindset, and they're really, really useful. And even though I don't need them anymore, I still love to use them. I don't think I could cast any kind of a spell without using my wand or my Athame. I use them all the time. Same with all of my discs and my plates. I use them all the time for spells. So yeah, just judge what you're going to need. If you're the kind of witch who isn't really going to do spells, you're probably not going to need any of those things, to be honest. So don't bother getting them. But definitely a tool that you're going to need 110%, no matter what, is going to be a Book of Shadows. So that's something you definitely should consider getting. I actually have a few, and I will do a different video on them, but as it's quite personal, I'm still umming and ahhing about how much to show you of my book. But another idea, instead of just having a Book of Shadows, is a bullet journal, guys. So a bullet journal is obviously something that you write affirmations in, that you doodle in, and you make notes in, and eventually when you've perfected something, you can then make a nice page to go in your Book of Shadows. So that's something I do quite a lot. I have lots of notebooks all over the place, and when something I think is ready or been perfected, that's when it's worthy to go in my Book of Shadows. That's when I make and design a page, which for those of you out there who have never watched my other videos, a lot of my Book of Shadows are scrapbook design, so I stick things in that are relevant and I make an incantation. I don't tell you how to use it or what to do with it. I give you an incantation that does a certain thing, and then I embellish the page with lots of ideas and different things in a section that you could potentially use that spell for, but it's completely customizable to your needs, and that's how I like to do my spells. But what I do when I'm doing rituals and ceremonies is I break them down to absolute detail. I like to know what moon phase, what I've used, what ingredients, whether I've used moon water or not, and how I laid out my altar. So I get those really detailed, but everything else is just pretty basic, and I use a bullet journal in advance before it's ready to go in my Book of Shadows. So that's an idea for you as well, guys. So that's all I've got for you today. The next video I'm going to do is on a few other magical tools. So I hope you enjoy them. I am now a member of Patreon, guys, so if you'd like to support my channel, then you please click the link for Patreon and do so. I'm going to be doing some things on Patreon for you guys that's going to be exclusive compared to everybody else out there. And if you've not checked out my Instagram or Facebook page, please do so. I do lots of different things on both of them, and my Instagram gives you a first look at my spells, my altar, the tools I use, and some mini videos of when I'm actually casting spells and what I've done the spells for. So that's also really interesting to follow me on there, guys. So if you've got any questions, then please leave a comment. If you like the video, give me that thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel, and then it'll give you notifications of when my next video comes out. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'm the City Witch. Be good to each other, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.